Welcome to Honest Whispers Preview to Sale. On this video I'll be previewing DC Direct's DC Infinite Crisis action figures, Series 2 Wonder Woman. This was released back in May 23rd, 2007. It's approximately 6 3/4 inches tall. With the base, it might actually be just under 7 inches. And the designer, well, basically it's based on Phil Jimenez's artwork, so he would be credited as the designer. And not just Wonder Woman, but all figures in the series are based on Phil Jimenez's artwork. And the sculptor is Greenwell, which all that information is actually right here on the back of the fine print. So I'm going to go over 6 different categories to review this. First category for action figures would be design, which covers articulation and the concept. And for this, as you can see, just the way she's kind of posed and standing, even though she has articulation, she has about, I believe, 11 points of articulation. And that's basically the neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, hips, and the knees. But then the way she's kind of posed, it pretty much or the way she's even sculpted, kind of predetermines how you can really pose with her. Now she does have on her right now are closed fists. So one other options, which I don't see many people do, but as an option you have switch out hands, and this one would be able to grab the sword or hold it, and then that would be either you could kind of use it as a placement, like a hand placed on the hip, or you can actually put it on the bottom of the handle, so it looks a little bit like she's doing a two-handed hold, just like here on the cover art. Now keep in mind, this cover art is actually done by Jim Lee, so that is not Phil Jimenez's artwork, and this figure is not based on that. So the concept is pretty good, but for me, in a situation like this, I think, I mean, maybe other than the arms and the switch out hands, so you could kind of pose it slightly different. But the way the legs, the way she's kind of like her body's slightly, her hips kind of sway to her left. So this really limits what you can do with the legs. And whoever designed the joints, this is a terrible idea where the joint is cut in the skin, so like you see a huge seam line. So already here you could see on her bottom of her leg, you could see like a flat area sticking out, and for me this reminds me of like this, and the way her, I guess, her butt sticking out and her waist is kind of like sticking forward. It kind of reminds me of this like 1970s, 1980s video where they have these weird mannequin robots dancing, and to me that's what it reminds me of. So I think the designing of the joints, that's a horrible idea or horrible execution. So for me, that's a huge minus. Although everything else, I do like the cape, but I have seen it where the cape is taken off, and unfortunately the hair kind of like leaves this gap between the hair and the shoulders, so that looks a little odd. For me, I usually would prefer this without the cape. So, but I missed out my chance, and she did come in a box set. Infinite Crisis box set where it came with Superman, Batman, her, OMAC, and so on. So like that one comes without the cape, and her hair doesn't have this gap. So if I had my choice, I would have rather have that. This one, as a fan, you know, I still wanted this, but I'm at a point, of course, I have to let things go. So the design, it's not bad. I mean, I can see what they were trying to do here, but at the same time, it just, there's certain designs that they shouldn't have kind of taken. If they did maybe like, I know this was a little bit ahead of their time, but if they did more like a seamless ball joint, like almost maybe even like a Revoltech Japanese action figures, or even Figma, where they try to make, if you make action figures and make a lot of articulation, number one thing for me, it should be the joints have to be seamless. It can't stick out like this, like a sore thumb. So for me, the design score, I give it a 7 out of 10, because overall it looks great. I mean, I do like the pose itself, but in cases like this, I would rather have preferred they don't make any joints at all, because you really can't do any different poses, especially with their legs. And it would have been more like a mini statue, which I would have been totally fine with, or like a Japanese PVC figure. Next category is sculpting. Sculpting basically covers the details and the execution. And because this is based on the artwork by Phil Jimenez, when you look at her face, it actually does have that resemblance. So there is, execution has been done pretty well. Costume is pretty much dead on. Boots, everything. Her body's a little bit, in my opinion, unproportioned, especially at the legs. This is all preference. I don't mind the not so muscular and feminine legs, but then this one, my thing with this is the thighs. Nobody really points this out, but you could see how the shadow, the thigh comes at a very sharp angle. It's almost like a blade, almost like, and then the way her legs kind of taper down, like it really thins out. So the leg proportion, from afar, it's not that bad, I guess. But at certain angles, at certain angles like this, it really looks like her legs are thinner or shorter than it should be. Especially like here, it looks like she's a bit top heavy. Otherwise, like her upper body right here, proportions, let me try to get it steady. Proportions look amazing, like from right there, like hips and up. But then when you start looking down right here, it just tapers down. And now I don't mind if it's trying to emulate a certain art style, but in this case, knowing how Phil Jimenez's artwork looked like, he even does have a little bit of a muscular tone to her legs. If you look at, and that's Jimenez. So either way, even if it was like this, I would say like you would have had to make it a little bit thicker, or maybe a little bit longer. But yeah, at this point, maybe it's that way she's kind of, another issue, another possibility is that the way she is angled like this, and how her upper body is sticking forward, that could be another, either the problem itself or adding to the problem, where you get this perception of the upper body's closer, so it looks bigger, and then the legs are a little bit further from you, so they look a little bit smaller, which again contributes to a bit of an unproportioned legs situation. Otherwise, the details amazing. The face is done pretty well. Very smooth, feminine looking face. And it does resemble, as I mentioned, a bit of art, Phil Jimenez's work. You can see a lot of details on the hair. And this one, I guess it could be a plus or minus, but they didn't sculpt her ears or anything like that, and just basically painted earrings on her hair. So for me, I think that's a little bit lazy or sloppy, kind of. Either way, it's fine. Maybe it could have been the earrings could have been a little bit closer, but for me, if this is the case, I would have rather liked it if it just looked like her hair was covering her ears and you can't see her earrings. If you can't see her ear, I don't see why the earrings would stand out like that. So for me, I guess that's part of a design flaw too, in a sense. So sculpting, I do like the way her chest plate is done. Pretty nice. Right there, it does look like there is some distortion on the paint, but I think the reasoning might be there's like a little seam line on the sculpting. So that could be like a molding issue, or even the cast itself might not have been completely cleaned, or whatever the case. Legs really done well if it was, proportional, but for what it is, you do see a little bit of muscle tone here and there. Even on her boots, you do see some wrinkling at her ankles, so it does have a nice touch. Cape does have a nice little like natural flow to it and wrinkles, so that really works well. And then the sword, of course, a lot of details for the size it is. To me, it looks a little bit more Egyptian than Greek, but whatever, it is what it is. And then, of course, the fingers and hands, nice proportions, nice, I guess, molding too, because you don't really see these little bumps or weird edges. So overall, the sculpting, I give it a 7 out of 10. Because one thing I forgot to mention is that nobody mentions this either, or mentioned it before, is that, at least for me, I think the way the head and is sculpted, or at least it's kind of plugged in, her neck sticks out way, or her chin, I'm sorry, her chin sticks out way too much. Okay, and I mean her if you look at where her neck is and where the tip of her chin is, there's just way too much length between the front of her neck to the front of her chin. I mean, I'm telling you right now, if you put your finger and measured your own, it wouldn't be sticking out this far out. Sorry. Okay. Tip there. So for me, it's not a huge thing, but then you will kind of start to notice that, whoa, like she's sticking her head out like really forward, like kind of, I mean, her hair kind of covers it, so it's not bad, but definitely part of the hit why I give the sculpting a 7 out of 10. Next category is painting. Painting basically covers the colors, the quality of the paint, and of course the application. And in this, starting from top to bottom, as I mentioned, face, part of the way her face looks so good is the painting itself. Overall, it's done really well. You don't see any, like the red star on her tiara, everything. The lines are pretty good. You may not be able to see here, but her eyeshadow is a little bit off. Her eyes are symmetrical and straight, but then one is a little bit dark, like the black part. One is a little bit darker than the other. So it does kind of slightly give it a mismatch. And of course, every figure is different. So you might get a slightly better quality and slightly worse. As I mentioned during the sculpting, the earrings are painted on the hair. At least they are somewhat symmetrical and leveled. But then this one's, it just looks a little smaller than the one on her right. So a little bit unproportioned. Costume, very nicely done. Colors, application, everything done well. You don't see much bleeding on the belt or the breastplate. Star's been imprinted, so you get that nice symmetrical, everything's all nice. Boots overall okay, especially from afar it looks very good, but when you start looking up close, a lot of bleeding over the borders, and of course certain angles, wiggly lines. And look at that angle right there on her left boot, outer left boot right there. Yeah, it's just kind of, both of them kind of curves and stuff. So yeah, it could have been a lot better. And in my opinion, I think the gold, these are all matte finish paint, so the gold, it would have been way better if it was like a metallic gold paint and have that more of a gold shine, similar to her lasso. Bracelets, colored well. Now, cape is the biggest flawed area. You see a lot of bleeding, a lot of wiggly lines, totally not straight. And at least from afar, it's not that noticeable. But yeah, especially looking at overall, like all the way through, horrible quality, because it's consistently bad. That's the best way I could say it. The wiggling. And because it's supposed to be on a cape, so it doesn't hurt that much due to like the curvy edges. But even right there, that red, how it tapers thin, I think that just looks very bad, horrible, sloppy. So unfortunately, painting could have been a lot better, but this one I would have preferred without it. Now, keep in mind, this is Jim Lee's artwork. So she has a red and gold cape. The cape here is different. She's wearing a blue cape. But if you read the comic, or at least the series, the way this is the design, the cape design, the designed by Phil Jimenez. So this is actually the cape she wears inside in the comic during the storyline. And of course, cover isn't really part of the continuity. So it is still accurate, but quality really sucks in my opinion. Especially like the wiggly lines. At least if you take off the cape, overall her figure is pretty good. So I give that a plus, and that's why I give it a pretty good above average score, 7 out of 10. Because I've seen worse, especially with the face, and at least they kind of painted some makeup to her. Like the red is different red than anywhere on her body or clothes, so that kind of stands out, like those little minor details. So could have been perfect, could have been so much better, but yeah, 7 out of 10. Next category is packaging. And packaging, this is what you would call, I guess in the proper term, a blister card packaging. I usually like more like the short term, a bubble card, short and simple, because it is in a little bubble, as you can see. So it's not that intricate or high quality, but at the same time, for what it is, for a bubble card, and I'm not going to grade it as a bubble card category, but still, for what it is, very nice design. The card itself isn't just a simple card where you get this, it is kind of cut out in a specific shape. So like that comic right there, it does kind of stick out a little bit, and as you can see with the other figures on the background, very consistent. I do like the little white background with little like lights and electricity or whatever kind of shining, so it kind of makes the figure stand out rather than just something blank or something that's just showing the figure itself on the back or whatever the case. My biggest plus on this, of course, it has all the names and and these are stickers, is the way they have the base, the Infinite Crisis base, and they're all consistent with the others on the top of the packaging rather than like on the bottom where you can't see. So now the base is part of like the design, and it is the actual logo of the action figure itself, or the packaging itself. So there's no Infinite Crisis printed. That's actually the base. So I think that's a brilliant, very nice, clever design on the packaging. Back is all the same as with the all the others, but it does give a little bit of nice little information. So it's not just blank artwork, and you can see the other figures as an example. And yeah, and other details, not just the characters, but just something simple like the list of the Series 1 action figures. And of course, as I mentioned, I do like it when they credit either the sculptor or whatever the artwork the figure is based on. So the packaging, I give it a really good score. I do like this packaging a lot. Rather than your normal, like a simple bubble card would be like a G.I. Joe, like an old school G.I. Joe. So compared to that, this very much nicer. You could see how everything very smooth, and of course for the buyer, you could see at least for this, the packaging condition definitely good. You do have a little ding here, a little scuffing there, so very minor, but other than that, no major creases or anything like that. Of course, I was very picky when I bought this, and a little bit scuffing on the edge. So right there, and this corner is pretty clean, so that one's not a huge, not an issue at all. So, and then of course the plastic, hardly, if I don't see any scratches or scuffing. So packaging, this wasn't that hard to store and keep in good condition. So for me, I give the packaging grade an 8 out of 10. Next category is value. And for this, when it first came out, the original retail price, I believe it was, and I really can't remember exactly, and I couldn't really find it either, but it's around like $9.99, between $9.99 and $14.99. If I had to guess, I think it was either $9.99 or $12.99, around that range. So it wasn't that expensive. And right now, unfortunately, for something that's 11 years old, the aftermarket value didn't go up that much. The lowest I've seen, there's one available on Amazon, which you could get it for about $14.75. And then the rest, either at eBay or whatever the case, this goes for about $25 average, or a little above, 25 plus shipping. So the next lowest I seen was $25 with free shipping. So when I list this, I'll probably list this as a bundle, including the other two, Donna, Troy, and Wonder Girl. So yeah, the aftermarket value just isn't there that much, but I'm pretty positive that I can definitely get a little bit over the retail, and over time it won't go up that much, but it will continue to rise in value, because there is one thing I have noticed when I was looking through when I was researching the current value, market value. And one of the things is that there weren't any used figures or loose figures for sale. So that usually is a good sign. That means whoever did open them ended up liking them, so probably held on to it. Now I have heard issues with the balancing and things like that. So, and as I mentioned, the way the pose is predetermined, that kind of tend to shrink the supply, or the demand, the demand levels, or whatever you want to call it. So, because for me, like, I like this a lot, but at the same time, when it's a like versus space issue, then at this point there are other Wonder Woman figures that I like more, or I could probably, or even like mini statues that's not that much bigger, that I would rather, display on my limited space. So the value, it is still up there, but not that much for something this old. So I give the value score just a little above average, 6 out of 10. Final category, overall, which basically just pretty much considers all the prior categories: design, sculpting, painting, packaging, value. And for me, as I mentioned, I do like this a lot. It is very unique. You don't have many Wonder Woman figures with the cape. At the same time, for me, if I had a preference, I would rather have it without a cape. In the past, I did like this more because knowing that you can take off the cape, I thought it was a better option. But when you do take off the cape, it just doesn't, it looks okay, but as I mentioned, the gap between her hair and her shoulders just makes it look a little bit weird. Kind of like the way her joint is, it just makes it look overall weird. So for me, this is one of those figures where I feel like, man, it's good, but it could have been so much better. Like, so like, I give the overall score a 7 out of 10. So to recap: design, 7. Sculpting, 7 out of 10. Painting, 6 out of 10. I'm sorry, painting, 7 out of 10. Packaging, 8 out of 10. Value, 6 out of 10. And overall, 7 out of 10. Thank you for watching. Until next time, I have to say, try reading Infinite Crisis, because actually it's not bad either.